3 years of late nights, missed dinners, and tireless dedication. Every client, every deal, every painstaking step forward, all built for a promise that never came. And then, in a single champagne toast, my promotion was handed to someone who had only been at the company 8 weeks, my husband's niece. What would you do if the people you trusted most, your boss, your family, even the man who promised you the world, betrayed you in the coldest, most calculated way? I could have stayed, I could have played nice, I could have swallowed my pride. But instead, I chose something far more powerful. I walked away, documented my value, and built a career they could never take away. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about reclaiming your worth, rising above betrayal, and proving that loyalty alone isn't enough. Self-respect is everything. Rain hit the windshield like scattered glass, each drop reflecting the city's cold pulse. Emma gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white against the soft hum of the car's heater. The dashboard clock blinked 2:37 a.m., that cruel hour when everything you've buried all day starts clawing its way back. In the passenger seat sat a manila envelope, swollen with papers, joint accounts, medical records, contracts signed in trust and broken in silence. Her eyes flicked toward it, then back to the road. She hadn't cried in weeks. Not since Richard left with a suitcase, a rehearsed apology, and their daughter's future folded neatly into his lies. The world outside was asleep, but Emma was wide awake, not from caffeine, not from grief, but from something sharper, something that felt almost like clarity, cut to a dimly lit kitchen, the kind that used to smell like morning pancakes and laughter. Now it smelled of burnt coffee and unopened bills. Emma sat at the counter, hair unbrushed, shoulders hunched, scrolling through a frozen bank app. Every number on the screen was a wound, every transaction a betrayal. "He took everything," she whispered, but her voice didn't break, it hardened. Across the room, a small light blinked, the night lamp in her daughter Lily's room. Emma stood, walked softly, and paused at the doorway. The girl slept curled like a question mark, her hand resting over a crumpled photo, the three of them at the beach, sunlight caught in laughter that now felt borrowed from another life. Emma knelt, smoothing the blanket over her. "You'll still have your dreams," she whispered, not realizing her daughter's eyes had fluttered open, catching those words like a promise and a secret all at once. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds, revealing the quiet wreckage of an ordinary home after emotional war. Dishes piled in the sink. A wilted plant by the window. A calendar still turned to the month he left. Emma stood by the sink, wearing one of his old shirts, not out of longing, but because it was the only clean thing left. Her reflection in the window didn't look broken. It looked unfinished. She tied her hair back, made coffee, and opened her laptop. The cursor blinked, waiting. On the screen was an email draft addressed to a law firm. She hesitated, not because she doubted her choice, but because she knew once she pressed send, the woman she used to be would vanish for good. Then came the sound, small, hesitant footsteps behind her. "Mom?" Lily's voice, soft but steady. "Are we per now?" The question hung in the air like a note played too softly to fade. Emma turned, kneeling so they were eye level. "No, baby," she said. "We're not poor. We're just starting over." Lily frowned. "Is starting over the same as losing?" Emma smiled faintly. "No. It's how you win without revenge." As she hugged her daughter, her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. One line glowed on the screen. "You don't understand what you're doing, Emma. Let it go before it gets worse." Her stomach dropped, but her eyes didn't flinch. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The camera lingered on her face, calm, resolute, quietly dangerous. Somewhere between fear and fire, Emma had found her opening scene, the place where endings learn to breathe again. The next morning unfolded in muted tones, the kind of silence that doesn't rest but listens. Emma stood in front of the mirror, a toothbrush dangling forgotten in her hand. She stared at her reflection, as if studying a stranger she hadn't met in years. The woman looking back had the same eyes, the same faint scar above her eyebrow, but her softness was gone, replaced by something taut and unreadable, The phone buzzed again on the counter, another message from the same number. "This isn't how you want to play it. You'll regret this." No name, no punctuation, just control disguised as warning. Emma exhaled slowly, placed the phone face down, and reached for her coat. Downstairs, Lily was already packing her school bag, humming a tune from the radio, one of those songs that tried too hard to sound happy. "You're up early," Emma said, forcing her voice light. "Can't sleep," Lily replied. "I dreamed Dad came home, but he didn't say anything. He just stood in the doorway." Emma froze, then smiled, the kind of smile mothers give when lies are the only way to keep children safe. "Dreams can't hurt you, sweetheart," she whispered. But when Lily turned away, Emma's expression faltered. She knew some dreams weren't dreams, they were echoes. At school drop-off, Emma parked across the street, watching her daughter disappear into the sea of uniforms and backpacks. For a moment, she envied the simplicity of that world, where arguments were over crayons, not contracts, where love wasn't something you had to audit. She waited until Lily vanished inside, then pulled out her phone. A voicemail from an unknown number played through the car's speakers, a man's voice, measured and unfamiliar. "Mrs. Carter, we've been instructed to discuss a potential settlement. We advise you to cease further legal action. Some things are better left unresolved." The line cut abruptly. Her breath caught, not out of fear, but recognition. Richard wasn't just running. He was building a wall of professionals and threats to stay untouchable. Later that afternoon, Emma met with a lawyer named Marcus, calm, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who spoke in truths stripped of sympathy. "You have a solid case," he said, flipping through her papers. "But he's not fighting for money anymore. He's fighting for power, the illusion of it." Emma folded her arms, staring at the photo of her husband attached to the file. "Then I'll take that too." Marcus hesitated, studying her. "You know, most people crumble at this point. You're holding up." "Holding up isn't the same as healing," she said quietly. Back home, the air felt heavier. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, everything seemed louder, pressing. She opened her laptop again, searching through old folders, receipts, messages. It was all there, the offshore transfers, the fake charity accounts, the emails between Richard and his mistress that blurred the line between intimacy and conspiracy. She wasn't just building a case. She was building a reckoning. Then, as the sun slipped behind the skyline, the doorbell rang. Once. Twice. She froze. Through the peephole, a man in a suit stood, holding a small envelope. "For Mrs. Carter," he said when she opened the door an inch. "From Mr. Carter's representatives." He handed it over and left before she could respond. Inside was a single typed line, "End this, or you'll lose more than money." Beneath it, a photo Lily, at her school gate, smiling at something unseen. Emma's knees buckled slightly, but her grip on the photo was steady. The camera moved in close, her breathing uneven, her eyes narrowing not in panic, but focus. The fear that once hollowed her had turned into something else, something sharper, deliberate, alive. As she reached for her phone and began to dial, her voice trembled only once before it steadied. "Marcus," she said, "change of plan. I'm not fighting quietly anymore." Outside, the wind howled through the empty street, not mourning, not warning, but waiting. The rain came down hard, smearing the city lights into a blur of gold and gray as Emma stood outside the glass doors. Her reflection fractured in the surface, half woman, half ghost. Inside, laughter and champagne collided with piano notes, and for a second, she hesitated. The world she once belonged to was still dazzling, still unreachable. Then she saw him. Richard, charming as ever, hand resting on the waist of a woman young enough to be mistaken for his daughter, saying the same empty lines he once whispered to Emma. Something cracked inside her, not anger, but an unbearable quiet. She walked in, each step cutting through the crowd like the sound of a forgotten truth returning home. Gasps rippled as eyes turned toward her soaked figure, mascara bleeding, eyes hollow but blazing with resolve. "You told me Lily's drawings were childish," she said softly, voice trembling yet sharp, "but she drew this building, Richard. She thought you lived here because good people save lives." The room froze. Richard's confident smirk faltered, his eyes darting, calculating. Emma placed the sketchbook on the white tablecloth between champagne glasses. "She's gone," she whispered, "and you're still pretending." A silence heavier than grief filled the air. Then Emma turned, not waiting for his excuses, not needing an audience. Her transformation wasn't loud, it was the quiet realization that she no longer needed to be seen to be free. As she walked out into the storm, the crowd parted not out of respect, but out of discomfort, like witnesses to truth they wished they hadn't heard. The moment she stepped outside, thunder rolled, distant, low, almost like applause. The storm had not stopped, it followed Emma like a shadow that refused to let go. She sat in the dim hospital corridor, her trembling hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her, painting her skin in pale exhaustion. Hours ago, she'd found herself standing at the orphanage gates, the same place she once thought about volunteering at with Lily, back when their world still had laughter. Now she was here for something different. A child had been rescued from a car accident, they said, alone, frightened, clutching a torn teddy bear. Something in those words had pulled her in, as if the universe had cracked open a second chance just for her. A nurse approached her gently, clipboard in hand. "You're not a relative?" she asked softly. Emma shook her head. "No, but maybe I could be." The nurse hesitated, then nodded, pity in her eyes. Emma followed her into the ward, where a small girl with wide, terrified eyes lay under a thin white blanket. The child turned, and in that moment the sound of the rain outside, the echo of Lily's voice, the ghost of every sleepless night, all collided. Emma knelt beside the bed, forcing a smile through the ache in her chest. "Hey there," she whispered, brushing the girl's damp hair from her face, "you're safe now." The little girl blinked, uncertain, then slowly reached out, gripping Emma's finger with the desperate trust only a child can offer. Later that night, Emma sat by the window, watching the rain streak down like the past washing itself away. Her phone buzzed, Richard's name flashing across the screen. For the first time, she didn't feel anger. Just a heavy, cold calm. She answered. "Emma," his voice cracked, "I didn't know about Lily." "I didn't know you were," she cut him off. "You knew enough," she said, quietly. "You just didn't care." There was silence, then a sigh, the kind that comes when guilt finally finds no more lies to hide behind. "I want to fix this," he said. Emma closed her eyes. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed," she replied, and hung up. Her gaze returned to the sleeping girl in the bed, the child's small hand resting on the edge of the blanket, open, waiting. Emma's breath trembled, her mind torn between the ghosts of what she'd lost and the fragile hope of what could still be. The nurse's voice echoed softly in her memory. "She has no one." That phrase became a heartbeat in her ears. She stood, pacing, unsure if love could ever grow again in soil scorched by loss. But as the girl stirred, whispering something in her sleep, a name, maybe, or just a sound, Emma felt something shift inside her. It wasn't healing, not yet. It was surrender, the kind that comes when pain becomes purpose. She sat beside the bed again, her hand brushing the girl's cheek, whispering, "You're not alone anymore." The camera would linger on her face, tired, fragile, yet glowing faintly in the sterile hospital light, a woman on the edge of breaking or beginning again. Outside, the storm softened to a drizzle, and in that stillness, Emma's reflection appeared in the window, not the broken mother who had walked into the rain, but someone slowly learning how to live again. The storm outside was merciless that night, rain lashing the windows, thunder rattling through the hospital's hollow corridors. Inside room 213, Emma sat in silence, her reflection fractured in the glass, one side lit by the cold blue monitor, the other swallowed in shadow. The child, Mia, lay on the bed, her small frame trembling under the thin white sheet. Machines beeped softly, each sound like a countdown. The doctor's words from earlier still echoed in Emma's mind. "She's critical. We're doing everything we can. Everything we can." But wasn't that what she'd told herself years ago when she couldn't save her own daughter? The guilt clawed back with venom, tearing through her like an old wound reopened. Mia stirred, her voice faint. "Emma, will you stay until the morning?" The question shattered her. She took the little girl's hand, fragile, translucent, and nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "I promise." She brushed the child's hair back, her heart fracturing with every labored breath she heard. "You remind me of someone," Emma whispered. "Someone I loved more than my own life." Mia looked up at her, eyes clouded but still glimmering. "Your daughter." Emma froze, the word daughter like a blade through her ribs. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes." Her name was Lily. Mia smiled faintly. "She's lucky you love her that much." Tears blurred Emma's vision as she forced a trembling smile. "Maybe she sent me to you." The monitors beeped louder, a warning. Panic surged in Emma's chest. "Mia, hey, stay with me," she whispered, pressing the emergency button, but her voice was cracking, shaking. The nurses rushed in, voices overlapping, orders flying, but Emma couldn't move. Her hand was still locked with Mia's, and she felt the small fingers tighten, then go still. The sound of the flatline cut through everything. One long, unbroken tone, the sound of a promise she couldn't keep. The nurses pulled her back gently, the room spinning around her. She stumbled to the wall, sliding down as her body convulsed with silent sobs. The rain outside roared harder, lightning slicing across the dark like a cruel spotlight. Emma covered her face, whispering, "Not again, not again." It was the same storm as the night Lily died, the same unbearable symmetry, as if fate itself had rewound just to break her one more time. But then something quiet, shifted. The nurse handed her something small, the child's sketchbook, found under the pillow. On the last page, drawn in shaky crayon lines, was a picture of two stick figures holding hands, one big, one small, standing under a blue sky. Above them, the words, "My angel found me." Emma pressed the book to her chest, her sobs softening into breathless disbelief. The grief didn't vanish, it never could, but for the first time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like release. The camera would stay on her face, streaked with tears, illuminated by the flickering light as she looked up through the rain-streaked window. "Thank you," she whispered to the storm. And as thunder rolled in the distance, her reflection in the glass no longer looked broken, just human. Just whole again. The scene would fade to black with the soft echo of her daughter's lullaby, now no longer sung in sorrow, but in peace, the same melody that had once ended in tragedy, now closing a circle of grace. The audience wouldn't just watch Emma's heartbreak. They would feel it, and in that still, haunting quiet, they'd understand. Healing doesn't always mean surviving. Sometimes, it means forgiving yourself for the moments you couldn't. The morning light was fragile, spilling through the blinds in soft, pale stripes across the hardwood floor. Emma sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea untouched, the steam curling upward and vanishing into the quiet. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving streets glistening with rain, leaves trembling in a gentle breeze. For the first time in days, the world felt real, tangible, almost forgiving. She traced her fingers over the sketchbook Mia had left behind, still pressed to her chest. Each drawing, the crooked lines, the clumsy hearts, the uneven letters, carried a weight far beyond paper. They were fragments of a life, tiny footprints of trust and hope, and proof that love could linger even after loss. Emma had spent years carrying grief like a stone in her chest, thinking she would never breathe freely again. But this quiet morning felt like a release, subtle yet profound. Joseph appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You've been up a while," he said softly, his voice careful, as though not to disturb the fragile peace in the room. Emma looked up, meeting his gaze. He saw the tear-streaked lines on her face, but said nothing. He didn't need to, I think. "I'm ready," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread. "Ready to let go." Joseph crossed the room, resting his hand on hers, grounding her without words. It was enough, a reminder that she didn't have to face grief alone. The day unfolded slowly, deliberately. Emma returned to the hospital, not to Mia's room this time, but to the quiet corridors she had avoided. Each step was measured, deliberate, a rhythm of reclaiming herself. She paused outside room 213, now empty, the machine silent. The nurses greeted her with nods, smiles of understanding rather than pity. She breathed in deeply, filling her lungs with the sterile, metallic scent of antiseptic, letting it mingle with the fresh rain lingering in the air. Later, Emma walked through the hospital garden, sunlight breaking through the clouds in golden shafts that shimmered across the wet grass. The roses she had tended alongside Mia were in bloom, vibrant and stubborn against the shadow of winter that lingered at the edges of the garden. She knelt, brushing rain-soaked petals from her palms, feeling the earth cool and real beneath her fingers. Life persisted. Life demanded she persisted too. Her phone buzzed, a message from Horizon Tech, congratulating her on the new initiatives she had spearheaded. A reminder that she was still capable, still needed, still worthy. The familiar pang of validation rose in her chest, but it no longer carried the bitter edge of comparison or resentment. She realized that her work, her passion, her worth, it had never been contingent on recognition alone. She had survived storms, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged not broken, but unshakable. Evening fell like a soft curtain. Emma sat on her porch, the city spread below like a constellation of quiet lights. Joseph joined her with 2 cups of tea, settling beside her in companionable silence. They watched as the sky deepened from lavender to indigo, the first stars daring to shine. The world was vast, unpredictable, and beautiful, and Emma finally understood that her grief, while permanent, was no longer a cage. "I think she's with me," Emma whispered, tilting her head toward the garden, imagining Mia among the roses. Sunlight glinting off her hair, a small hand reaching up to hers in a silent promise. "I can feel her. Always." Joseph squeezed her hand, no words needed. The past 3 years of relentless loss, frustration, and quiet endurance, all the moments she had feared would define her, were finally folding into a memory, not a weight. As night settled, she wrote in her journal, letting words flow like water. "I survived. I loved. I lost. And still I rise. Life doesn't wait for permission, and neither will I. My heart is bigger now, not because the pain has vanished, but because I have endured it. I have lived it. And that is more than enough." Later, she placed the sketchbook back on the shelf beside her daughter's photograph, a shrine to love, resilience, and memory. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint melody, the same one she had sung to Lily years ago. Emma listened, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, smiled without restraint. The melody wasn't just a memory, it was a promise that love endures, that grief transforms, and that the heart, though fractured, is capable of infinite repair. Emma turned toward the window, watching the city pulse with quiet life below. Somewhere in the dark, a child laughed, a stranger's joy, echoing the resilience she now carried inside her. And in that echo, she heard the truth she had been waiting for. Survival is not simply about getting through the storm. It is about stepping into the sunlight afterward, unafraid to be seen, unafraid to feel, unafraid to live. The camera would pull back slowly, capturing her silhouette against the backdrop of glowing city lights. The sketchbook and photograph framed by the soft lamplight, a portrait of loss transformed into enduring strength. And the final lines, lingering in the viewer's mind, would be hers alone. "I have loved. I have lost. And I have chosen to rise." The screen fades to black, leaving a quiet, lingering resonance, the kind of ending that doesn't tie everything neatly, but leaves the heart full, unsettled in the most beautiful way. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, betrayed, or forced to watch someone else reap what you worked for, hit that like button right now. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would? And don't miss out on more empowering stories of triumph, courage, and turning heartbreak into victory. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds you of your own strength. Every share, every like, Every comment helps us reach someone who needs to hear this story today.